Welcome back to Capital Conversations. I'm Marty Owens, and here tonight with me to talk about all things political up here at the Capitol, I have Paul Demko from Politics in Minnesota, esteemed journalist and reporter for that institution, and I have Doug Groh, who's a New Age reporter now.
That's right.
With Minpost. Yeah, well, I almost said your old company, but I did the name which shall not be spoken.
Well, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, I knew you for the time back then, but now you cover politics for Minpost and Joel Kramer, and you're doing all the tough, heavy lifting up here now.
We have younger people that do the heavy lifting, except when you end up uncovering guns, and they're going to go tonight until. I've seen the rank and file from both sides pouring into the state office building, so it could go a while tonight.
Oh, okay, well, hopefully it won't get too contentious over there, but I understand it might.
It's funny, you would think that we could just have the debate say, okay, this is point A, this is point B, that's enough, because we've heard it all.
Right.
You know, for the last, what, 15 years? So we know the discussion. Let's do a vote.
Well, let's talk about this for a minute. Paul, in your estimation, or Doug, why did Democrats run away from this gun issue like they were scattering from the roaches when a light flips on? What happened? What went down?
I mean, that's a good question and open to speculation. I mean, I think there's some speculation that the leadership in the House said, we're only going to make you take so many hard votes. And if you're an outstate Democrat, we're not going to make you take a hard vote on guns, and maybe leave those hard votes for taxes and gay marriage. But that's speculation on my part.
I think you're right. I was talking to Representative Hillstrom today, who came up with what she thought was a middle ground thing, but I think it was almost a negative. The NRA supports the bill that Hillstrom wanted to pass, which was middle ground in her eyes,
But what would that have done?
Well, very little. It wouldn't have done any of the. It wouldn't have closed any loopholes. It would have done no background checks. It was essentially getting more information about your mental stability and things like that back into the system. So there wasn't going to be a great deal that was done. She describes it as a bill that could pass. And so now we're back to the trying to close the loopholes in the PAMR bill, and the NRA is fighting that mightily, as the GOP is, a number of outstate DFLers. So it's a no-win. It seems to me the logical thing to do is to try to get it through committee and get it on the floor and let people vote their conscience. As I started off, Hillstrom said, hey, look, the leadership told us very clearly at the beginning of this session, we're not telling, you've got to vote your districts. You don't have to vote, you don't have to take a party line vote on this issue. Okay. And they are not.
Well, it's an interesting assertion because Representative Hillstrom comes from a pretty liberal district where I would guess universal background checks might pull pretty well.
But she also points out that she's from the district of Jesse Ventura. Okay. So I think it's not, it's a little shakier than that, but the vitriol she's receiving from the gun control advocates is huge.
Well, that's what I'm wondering about this in the bigger context of what goes on in a session. We've got, the Democrats all during the election accusing the Republicans of overreaching on a number of social issues, and these are bread and butter Republican issues. Guns, gay marriage, all this stuff. And I'm wondering if the Democrats under Thiessen's leadership and Bach, sort of the pragmatists, have not had a little reset, or hey, maybe we need to rein in some of these liberal urban legislators. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think one thing I think is the gun lobby does an amazing job of getting their people out. A true citizen lobbying force in force at the Capitol. I mean, those people show up and they stay, and their voices are heard. I mean, they make the people showing up for the Vikings look like like a small horde. So I think, I think that got people's attention, and I don't think there was nearly as an effective kind of citizen lobbying operation on the other side, on the folks who want to see gun control. So you know, I think that probably scared Democrats a little bit.
Well, this is a hunting state, you know. I mean, it's going to be hard to find somebody that's, you know, didn't have a grandpa or a dad who went hunting, even if they do live in an urban area. But let me ask you this, Doug. You've talked to some of these guys. I'm talking about ordinary citizens, guys and gals down at these hearings. What do you hear from them on both sides, the hardcore gunnies? And
you know, that's so hard, Marty, because the people that come are so locked in that their positions are so extreme on either side of the issue that it's always, a few years ago, recall there was an organization of gun owners and hunters that tried to start a group like the NRA, but not the NRA, as a way to get that, what many of us would think was a common middle ground. That group went nowhere. And I think you see the same thing happening this time, is that searching for common middle ground when you have two very strong extremes is extremely, extremely difficult. Yeah. And it's funny, we talk about, you know, I know that the DFL legislators, the leadership would like to make this about taxes and about the budget and how responsible managers they are. But when you think about it, the cultural issues that are going to matter 20 years from now are gay marriage. They are guns and how prevalent they are in our culture. So these are not just headline-stealing, sexy issues. Right. These are the issues that really do define the culture much more so. We'll have a balanced budget. By law, they have to have a balanced budget. And we'll never have enough money to fund all the programs that may be deserving of funding. So I think these are issues that capture the public imagination, and certainly they capture the extremes.
Yeah. Same?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Well, good. Let's switch gears a little bit then. You mentioned the budget. The governor has now revised his proposal, and apparently they've dropped a number of, he's dropped a number of things like the business to business or the sales tax, and then of course this, a lot of people said the regressive, what is it, sales, I'm sorry, rebate, property tax.
Oh, right.
What kind of reaction is that getting, and what are people saying?
I mean, I think, you know, Dayton clearly got beat up for weeks pretty badly by, you know, business interests, in particular Republicans for sure, but even quite a few Democrats, especially on that business-to-business tax proposal.
They weren't exactly behind the old governor, were they?
No, they were kind of avoiding comment, if anything, and so he's, you know, scrapped the sales tax expansion entirely. Kind of to go along with that, he's scrapped the $500 property tax rebate, and it's kind of a less ambitious budget than what he originally put out in January that I think, you know, reflects what he thought he saw as possible at this point.
I was surprised, and at the target session today with the House Democrats, I was a little surprised to see the surcharge. The fourth tier, I think everybody expects will pass. On the wealthiest Minnesotans, there'll be a higher tax rate. Now, today the House Dems talk about adding a surcharge on top of that, and I think that was a little surprising, simply because it's going to put Minnesota as an outlier state again in the upper reaches, and when you're talking about the top income tax rate.
Yeah, I mean, if you add up, they didn't phrase it this way, but if you look at all the revenue in what they're proposing, it adds up to about $2.6 billion. That is about $750 million more than Dayton is proposing spending. I don't think you're going to see that from the Senate tomorrow.
Well, listen, the Representative Albright was here and said, you know, if this governor's budget passes, you know, businesses are likely to again want to flee the state. What are you hearing from that side of the, you know, this issue?
Well, I mean, we hear that about everything, it seems. So it's tough to know what is reality and what is just fear-mongering. I think there was a persuasive case made on the business-to-business services, particularly on border towns, and particularly given how technology has changed how you contract out for services, that could be an issue. I think there's a less persuasive case with raising income taxes and whether that's going to drive people out of the state.
They always talk about South Dakota as an example because it's the lowest tax
Right.
place in the cosmos.
Come to Sioux Falls.
Yeah, right. And they had among the states with the lowest job growth in the last few years.
Yeah.
Minnesota, high tax state, better than the national average in job growth. So
You both have been to the Dakotas, right?
Yeah, I grew up there. It's God's country, Marty. What are you trying to say?
Well, I was going to say, when they kick people out of
Arizona for a job.
Yeah, exactly. When they kick people out of hell, they end up in North Dakota. I just wanted to, see what you were hearing on that. But let you take it a step further. You've got the DFL that's kind of backed off on some issues, but they're full on other issues, like perhaps the same-sex marriage thing, which a lot of people, were actually surprised about the amendment being defeated, and then came back. They feel renewed, reinvigorated to push this forward and get it removed. But for people that don't know, you guys, right, it's illegal today in the state to get married.
Correct.
Same sex. So if they were to legalize it, I mean, is that what this proposal would do? Just legalize it or remove it as an illegal activity, or would it enshrine it? And we're not talking about a constitutional amendment here.
No, we're not, and I guess I'm technically not exactly 100% positive, but I think it would legalize gay marriage.
Yeah, they're not going to just, as I understand it, they're not just removing the illegality of it. They're adding legality
They're going
of
to
it.
say, add statutes that say it's okay.
And then as of on August 1st, every newspaper in the state would have photographs of gay couples getting married, and there'd be some outrage, and then it would go away.
Well, I mean, I think it's an interesting question whether it is politically risky for Democrats to push this. You had a Star Tribune poll a couple weeks ago that showed only 38% support for gay marriage. Yesterday, you had a national Washington Post poll that showed 58% support for gay marriage.
And a national poll?
Yeah.
Poll national, yeah.
Which is kind of staggering. So those two things, I can't reconcile those two numbers in my head. It's got to be somewhere in between there, I think.
Well, I guess there'll be some arguing pretty soon on this issue.
There will, and I think part of the thinking too is that if you don't do some of these things this session, and again, I don't think that the legislative leadership, I don't think Bach or Thiessen were real eager to get into these areas, but they were going to come up. You cannot just say, no, we're not going to listen. You can't just cover your ears.
Yeah, too many of the caucus people.
I think the thought behind the people, for example, on gay marriage was, well, if we can't do it this session, we surely can't do it next session, because it's an election year for the House. So we're not going to do it then. So you strike while the iron is hot. Overreach is such a funny term, and it's probably one that we use in the media far too often, because, gee, you elect people to accomplish certain things.
Overreaching to some may not be reaching far
exactly.
enough.
It's why you elected Joe Schmo to come in and represent you. It surprises me, for example, I thought a no-brainer would be the minimum wage.
Right.
Well, even that, which is as basic a DFL thing as I can possibly imagine, is running into some trouble. It's running into, oh, gee, do we really want to pay people overtime after 40 hours rather than 48 hours? Even within the caucus.
Well, if you look at the difference between the Senate bills and the House bills on minimum wage, it's quite staggering. I mean, the House, I think, right now is at $9.95 an hour. I believe the Senate's at like $7.50. Yep. So I can't imagine what that conference committee is going to be like when they try to reconcile those.
So I guess it shows again, and perhaps this is a credit to the DFL, is that where Republicans we saw in the last couple of sessions were in lockstep on most things in the majority, DFLers are never going to be in lockstep on anything, and that's who they are.
Well, it seems to be the nature of the majority when the Democrats are in the majority, much more so than the Republicans. But let's wrap up. Let me ask you guys, what other issues, if any, are hot right now? Anything going on with, are we going to have Sunday liquor laws, or are we stuck in the 1800s now still?
Well, I think that's dead.
story?
I don't know that for sure, but I think it's dead.
Comes up every year, gets killed every year, right? Okay.
Well, and interestingly, one of the organizations that fights it is the liquor industry in some cases, where, hey, if I don't have to open on Sunday, if I can't open on Sunday, neither can my competitor down the street.
Well, that's right.
So, so it becomes, it's hard to find a constituency to push something like that through.
At one point, there was talk of a compromise where you would be allowed to be open 6 days a week. Wouldn't matter which days, but only 6 days a week.
Oh,
so you could open
interesting.
Sunday and be closed Monday. But I don't think that got traction.
No, because they probably couldn't all agree on what day.
Right, exactly.
So let me ask you this, anything else going on? What, Broadcorp came out, he apologized for the drunk driving. Is he still making news up here? What's the story?
I don't know.
What's
if
going on with the
people are paying
lawsuit? Are
attention.
we paying bills? We got lawyers?
Well, I mean, the question to me is, are they going to go into discovery? And are you going to be able to depose people and ask them about affairs? And that process hasn't begun. I'm not really sure if it will begun, because that's when the pressure would really ratchet up to give him some money to go away.
There are a few angels in this, and there are wonderful people that serve, but there are very few of them are angels. And
right.
what is it about angels? Where wise men don't go where angels fear to tread, or something like that.
Right, right. So but other than that, no other breaking scandals,
Well, I mean,
news going on up here?
no. I mean,
Not that we deal with
I
that.
wrote a lot about the healthcare exchange, so I'll mention that. I mean, that passed, and Dayton's going to sign it tomorrow. So.
Okay, good. Yeah, healthcare exchanges, we talked about that.
And that's going to be a huge label for or against the DFL. It's going to be complex for a while, and we're not going to know. This is going to be so interesting because there's going to be changes in administrations, both at the national and at the state level. Before this thing settles in, the prediction of most supporters is that give us 5 years, people would never go back. Well, I don't know that you get the 5 years, you know, and that's going to, a real rocky start could make this very difficult.
Well, Doug Groh from MinPost, Paul Demko from Politics in Minnesota, great to visit with you guys. You guys are awesome. I know you're keeping the pulse of this place and bringing the people.
We do it for the big money and for the glory, Marty.
No, I know. Demko's rolling large. I've seen what he drives. Give me a ride. We'll get the bus together later. But I appreciate both of you and all the hard work you're doing up here, and thanks a lot for coming
Thank you,
out.
Marty.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon. That's it for tonight. Don't forget to tune in next, on Wednesday mornings to KFAI 90.3 FM, where we talk about politics up here at the Capitol every 7:40 a.m. That's KFAI Radio. And don't forget to check us out at minnesotacapitalnews.com, and you can follow us on Twitter at MNCapNews. Thanks for tuning in tonight. We'll see you at the Capitol.